Hello and welcome into Big Ten Plus 4. Again, we are college sports with Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler. That's Sam Sprunger. Sam, how we doing today?
I feel kind of out of place not having any live stuff going on right now, other than like baseball and stuff. I do pay attention to that, but it's still not a traditional busy time of the year.
No, I mean you're spot on, and that's kind of the thing too. We've had some discussions because as we continue on here during the summer, I mean we're hitting the dog days of summer, but we do have some different things that the Big Ten still involved with. Of course, the NFL draft, which is going to be a pretty big core of today's show. NBA draft. We'll do some different feature things. We'll have some fun with some college stuff, and might even dabble a little bit into some other areas. But for the most part, I mean we're still going pretty Big Ten heavy. And to your point,
it is in the name, so
correct. Yeah, I know it's kind of the part of the show, so we're going to
Right.
continue on there.
Right.
But to your point, I found myself last night. I was flipping through the TV and I was trying to find something, even a baseball game. I was having a hard time finding an MLB game on my TV. There was no NBA with the play-in games. It's really kind of rough going from watching a Big Ten basketball game every single night of your life for 5 months
Or
to
multiple.
nothing. Yeah.
Multiple games.
Yeah.
per
It's
night.
like cold turkey. I mean, it's kind of hard.
Going through withdrawals,
And we talked about before, are you still following the MLB rather regularly or not so much?
Well, it's so hard, that whole thing of they have such a long season that it's hard to pay attention to every game, and I get that, and kind of what I do anymore with the way you get older, other things become more important, and so I'll still pay attention if I've got time. I pay for the MLB at Bat app. It's $20 a year, and I get all audio from every game in the major leagues. So I do that for the Cubs, so I can sit here, and if I'm working, if I'm doing something that doesn't require me to pay attention, I listen to a lot more games on the radio than I do watch them.
Interesting. Well, you might have sold me on that because I was sitting there in my yard the other day and I was like, I wish there was a way I could just listen to all the different audio games. And there is. Okay, so I might
$20 for 1 year, and you get every audio. So if I get an alert that says there's a no-hit bid in play, I can jump to that audio and listen to the radio call of it. It's pretty cool, and you can choose either team.
I like that. Okay, yeah, I think you might have sold me on that. So, of course, Hughes.
Do you need me to talk for a few minutes so you can sign up for it right now?
I need to. Hughes has to be your favorite guy, right? You being a Cubs fan, Hughes has to be the favorite.
Well, and here's the thing. Yeah, he absolutely is. And here's another reason. It's not just that he's the Cubs, but he tells the story of the game. He doesn't just say there's a pitch outside. He'll reminisce. He'll pull up information. Now, granted, I know he's got people in his ears, but he has to prep that, and throw that out there to where his people do his searching and find the exact details or whatever. But he tells such a great story along with telling you what's happening during the game. One of my favorite things is he describes the uniforms. He paints the picture for you. Granted, now it's sponsored, but he's been doing that for years. He'll tell the story. The Cubs are wearing their blue tops and gray trousers, and he describes it. So what that team looks like on the field. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the best. I mean, especially with Vin Scully not doing Dodgers games anymore. Like,
right.
Hughes might be at that very top spot when it goes across the league.
And I tell you what, Vin Scully was amazing. His voice is very distinct, so you knew it was Vin Scully, and he did very similar.
His storytelling, his storytelling was top notch.
Oh yeah, so yeah, it's great.
Well, and then let's get this too, because we do have some big things to get to here in just a moment. But I mentioned I was looking at the TV. I couldn't find a baseball game to watch last night. I couldn't also find a playoff NBA game because, of course, the playoffs are started. The play-in games, well,
the NCAA tournament anymore now.
The first four, basically, and so you have those games happening Tuesday, Wednesday, and I think they have another game of the play-ins before we get into it all this weekend.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. They've got to establish the 8 seed in both conferences.
What do you think about the play-in? Hate it, love it?
I don't pay attention to the NBA until it gets to the playoffs, and even then, it's kind of in the way back in my mind because, we've talked about. I did that in the Sam Sentinel of how college basketball fans, while we wish our stars well, unless you're a diehard NBA fan, after that you're not going to follow them much. You'll know who they are. You'll probably maybe look up that player or whatever, but you're just to me. Once they go, that's why I want them to stay, because then I can enjoy their greatness for another year, just because I don't follow the NBA near as much.
Well, and I suppose even though you don't follow the NBA, you can speak to if the play-in is a good idea, bad idea on the principle of kind of what you mentioned, that it has a bit of an NCAA tournament feel to it. It's win and survive and advance.
Right.
It's lose, go home, which is awesome.
Sort of.
Right. Well, now you also have like 70% of the NBA's teams now in the playoffs with this structure. So it feels like it's a bit of a participation free for all. Everybody's invited to the playoffs, but you're also getting the elimination game factor. So there's pros and cons. Do you pick a side there?
Let's say it this way. To give it more of an excitement, winning or losing you're done type feel, that makes it better, I guess, because you don't get those lose or you're done until game 7s or elimination games in the series, and it's just one of those that it's
Yep.
If it's 3-0, that's an elimination game, and if it's 3-0, there's maybe a chance that you're going to win 1, maybe 2, but you're not going to win the series. So I don't mind it. It makes it a little bit better. If I were following it, I'm sure if I was a purist, I'd hate it. But it brings a little bit more excitement to it.
Can you be an NBA purist though? It's the most progressive league there is. It feels like there's no tradition whatsoever, really.
Yeah, you're kind of right.
I mean, you know what I mean? Everything's rapidly changing. So
you're not wrong at all.
But anyways, we do have some other things to talk about with the Big Ten having an influence. The NFL draft is coming up here in a couple of weeks. We're going to be joined by a couple of different people throughout the summer. But coming up in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about the NFL draft with one of our guests. But do want to start taking a look at what we're getting into with the NFL draft. And we don't necessarily want to – we're not going to do the old, hey – pick number 1. Who do you have, Sam? Pick 2.
No.
Who do you have?
No.
There are a billion mock drafts out there, and there's a lot of draft conversations, but we wanted to highlight some of the top prospects. And really, I think it starts up front on the defensive side in the trenches for the Big Ten. Aiden Hutchinson shows to be the best player available, and he's expected to be the top Big Ten player selected. Of course, the defensive end from Michigan. Some people got him at number 2. Some have flirted with him at number 1, but for the most part, he's sitting kind of around number 2. This is somebody, Sam, and I'm curious kind of what you think, but Michigan finally gets over the hump. They end the drought, 17 years without a Big Ten title. They get that win. They kind of get the monkey off the back. Aiden Hutchinson, when talking with people around the Michigan program, not only was he just terrorizing quarterbacks and just a menace there in the trench in games, but he was a leader who really changed the culture. And that's what everybody says. They say this guy came into the weight room and he told the coaches, look, break me. Just give me everything you have, and meant it. And he poured it all out there. When he was hurt, he was still on the field, just as energetic, leading the team. This is a guy that you would want in your locker room, Aiden Hutchinson.
Is this an NFL coach's dream player? Seriously, because he's one that knows what it's going to take to become successful. He stayed for his last year in order to win the Big Ten, and they did it. And he made that a point when he said he was coming back. He said, we want to win. I want to win the conference. And when he came back, he would have been probably a top 10 draft pick at that point last year. He came back for that, and now he's considered one, if not the best talent in the pool, one of the top 3. I haven't seen him any lower than number 2 or 3, and that's taken into consideration. And just as much as I do, when it comes to the NFL draft, it's not always best player. I've had this conversation with a bunch of people. It's not always best player available, unless you have so many holes that the best player available will fill one of those. It's need. Right. It's draft by need. So he might go 3. He might drop to 3 or so. I don't think he will, but he could. And it just is because the teams prior saw more need elsewhere.
Well, and the beauty is the Lions have picked number 2.
Right.
The players have picked one. Like, those are a lot of teams with a lot of holes. So
that poor man.
But he had 14 sacks last year. I mean, when we talk about what he did last season, it was very impactful. And I've talked with him before, like to your point about being a coach's dream. The guy is a stand-up, just young man that really speaks well. He's, you know what I mean? He carries a lot of the intangibles you look for.
It's definitely something that's missed in pro sports now, are well-spoken people in their positions. And I don't mean that as a slight to those that can't talk eloquently. I'm just saying it's well-spoken in saying, the right trigger things, but yet meaning it.
Yeah.
I mean, he exudes to me what a coach would absolutely want from a player.
And then, of course, he had teammate David Ojabo, who really made for that 1-2 punch there in Ann Arbor. But Ojabo got hurt during the pro day at Michigan, so now his stock falls a bit because he was going to be he was a surefire first-round draft pick. With that injury, we have to see what teams are willing to kind of take the gamble, just because it's always a gamble when you come off an injury like you are with David Ojabo.
Well, and if he doesn't go in the first round, it'll be because those teams that can afford to use a first-round draft pick on someone like him recovering from an injury, not guaranteed to be back for the full season, it'll be because of those teams didn't see the gamble worth it, I guess. I don't think he's going to go in the top 15 like he was originally thought to go, because those teams need to fill those holes now.
Yep.
So if it gets to the second round, then I think he goes probably pretty high in the second round, because you can justify taking a second round pick or lower if he falls that far. I don't think he will. I think he's still just an amazing talent that those teams that will say, hey, we drafted in the first round for one of our big needs. Let's take him as a backup or, to fill a need further down the road, because he's going to be, I'd be shocked if he's not an all-pro at some point.
Well, and the thing is, this is completely apples to oranges, and I'm not comparing him for more reasons than just kind of the situation of coming out of college hurt. I sense a Jalen Smith vibe in terms of, the super promising talent gets hurt, falls in the draft, and Jalen Smith has went on to make a decent career. I think I'm still not really sure, and I don't follow the NFL, I suppose, enough to know why the Cowboys let him go last year.
Right.
That was surprising to me. I'm not really sure what the details or the answer was there, but nonetheless, I think you have somebody like that, because Ojabo also played defensive end at Michigan, but at the NFL, his size might make him more of a linebacker. He's kind of one of those tweeners that the teams have to decide what to do with.
And that's also another thing is you take into consideration that, can he make that transition seamlessly and still produce the way he was expected to be as an end? If that's where, if they move him back out to the linebacker position, you've got to decide, is he going to be as effective, and do we use a second round pick on him? 2
more guys in the trenches from the Big Ten want to highlight here before we take our first break at the end of the first quarter.
Hey, we're almost on time. Yes.
Yeah, usually Sam and I go about 40 minutes in the first half, 10 minutes in the second half, and it's really unbalanced.
We're doing what we can.
Yeah, let's head to West Lafayette. George Karlaftis, the defensive end for the Boilermakers. This is somebody who's really climbing the charts in the NFL draft for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I'd always thought, I've watched my share of Purdue, so I'm pretty familiar with Karlaftis, and he never really appeared to be in the top couple of rounds. I mean, he was always kind of a 3-4 round pick that I'm seeing him as high as in late first round in
Yeah.
some of the things that I've looked, which really says that, he's done what it is taken to get teams to notice him. And Boilermaker fans already know how fantastic he is. I mean, he's a leader, he's a go-getter, he is he has a lot of the characteristics that Aiden Hutchinson has, just maybe not with the talent that he's got,
And for Karlaftis, you're looking at somebody who had 10 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks last year, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 forced fumbles. And keeping in mind here, like Hutchinson's numbers, when we read those to you, he also had Ojabo on the other side. So like
right,
offenses couldn't really pick where they wanted to go because,
or they did, and they got bit by one side.
Correct.
They couldn't do both.
With Purdue's defense, no disrespect, Sam, but it wasn't to the same level of what Michigan was putting out there. So you highlighted Karlaftis and said, okay, he's lined up here. Let's go here. Like you can play away from him, especially when you're a star like he was there. Also, bring up on the offensive side of the ball, Tyler Linderbaum at Iowa. Now, this is somebody you've highlighted in your headlines before, but they've talked about him being one of the best centers that the Big Ten has ever seen. And let's be honest, offensive line, I don't know how to evaluate this. I just don't. I go off of what coaches say.
Yeah. I sit there. I've actually done it before. Watched a football game and watched the lines for as long as I possibly could, because you sit there and think, oh well, he's doing a great job keeping him away from the ball. He's keeping his techniques and stuff like that. And then you're like, the announcers are just ripping him apart. Like, what are you talking about? I do not know how to evaluate line, O-line, D-line. Well, D-line is a lot easier than the O-line.
It is.
Because it's his goal to get past or contain, unless you know the offensive structure, it's really hard to tell whether or not the guys are doing what they're supposed to be on offense.
Well, and that's the thing too, right? Like you can evaluate technique from a defensive lineman, and I suppose you can from the offensive lineman too, but like sometimes you don't know if he's supposed to be pulling, if it's a screen play. Like there's a lot that's harder. Did he
miss an assignment that we're not aware of?
Yeah, like it's a lot easier with defensive linemen. So no, but what coaches say about Linderbaum is this guy is the real deal. So expect him to be one of the first linemen off the board.
I'm completely surprised that I didn't, send you a text, because I was reading. I don't even know who it was that I was reading, but they had him going in the 3rd round, and I almost had kittens, because I'm like, how in the world do you say this guy is not going in the first, early 2nd round? I mean, like how in the world, a 3rd round? Seriously, you think you're getting Linderbaum in the 3rd? No way.
It would be a win if somebody does. I mean,
somebody is getting a steal if they get him in the 3rd round. Jeez, I would personally call the Bears and tell them, look, give away what you can to get this guy in your pick, because come on.
Hey, you already did. You gave away Khalil Mack this offseason.
Okay.
So you ain't got much left in Chicago to give, is my point.
No, I'm saying picks. You gave away 3 first-round picks for Mack. Why not give 17 of them away for Linderbaum, who's going to be an anchor?
I more or less was just hoping to soak in your misery as a Chicago Bears fan, but I don't think I got
Cubs fan here. Remember?
Okay, good enough. Yeah, that's the last the champion team. So that's the just a bandwagon, Sam.
Bandwagon they're the most recent championship team in Chicago, but you got to remember what I put up with prior to that year. So I had to put up with everything. Nothing gets on my nerves when it comes to the ribbing that people give me. Call me callous, call me what you will. It just doesn't bother me anymore.
Season.
There we go. Season. Yeah. I'm like cast iron.
Let's get to the first quarter break. All right, we're going to pick back up with a little bit more Big Ten talk here. Some skill positions. Yes. Ohio State has many. You look at receivers.
Shocker.
Yeah, no kidding. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson. The Buckeyes are going to be really well represented when it comes to wide receivers. They got some of the best that this draft has, point blank period.
Is there a better name than Chris Olave?
It is a good one. Good one.
It just rolls off the tongue. It's nice. I like it.
But
no, they're fantastic receivers. I mean, they both killed Purdue, and I'm gonna do a lot of my referencing on that because what they do against my team is one. If they stand out to me while they're doing that, they must be pretty good. Not that Purdue, you're doing it against Purdue, you must be good. It's just they're really that good,
right?
And I'm shocked Olave has stuck around. I thought last year he could have went, but he chose not to, and because he was fantastic last year. He's my thought of the two receivers that he'll have the most impact immediately on a team, personally.
Oh, I think you're right. And of course, for Ohio State, it just continues to reload. They still have Jackson Smith and Jigba there in Columbus.
One nice thing is, though, I was looking at Purdue's schedule. They don't play Ohio State or Michigan State next year.
Who are their East Division games?
Penn State, week 1. Maryland. Who else? And IU. Wow,
that's not a bad schedule for Purdue.
Yeah, it could set up nicely if they could just do something in the West.
Penn State's a little tough, of course, with Sean Clifford, but
I did see somebody said that they gave like 10 biggest upsets per each week or whatever, or 10 their 10 biggest upsets according to each week or whatever it was. I don't remember the exact wording, but they said Purdue beats Penn State.
Interesting. And Penn State,
it's week 1. It's week 2. It's September 3rd, or week 1, I guess. Yeah, week 1.
And Penn State has Jahan Dotson that's left the team. He's here in the draft. Jaquan Brisker, the safety, one of the best safeties you can find in the country. Not the best, but one of the better ones. So Penn State is losing a lot. They do get Clifford back, which is a big plus if he plays well. But that's another conversation we'll be having soon too, is taking a look at these teams with the spring football. I mean, right now, and I would be in the same spot I was last year, but Ohio State, you look at the talent. Last year, I would have said, that's a lot of talent. That might just do it again for the 4th or 5th straight year. They get upset. But when you're looking at just on paper, it's hard to not like Ohio State early again.
Yeah, well, it's one of those that sounds like a broken record. Ohio State. It's going to be that way. It's been that way most of my life, if not all of it. And I don't see it stopping anytime soon either. They don't rebuild, they reload.
And that's the thing, right? Like we're talking about, they lose these 2 first-round wide receivers in Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and they're like, oh, yeah, we still got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who just set the Rose Bowl record.
Yeah, it's one of those that you know, any other regular, and I'll use the air quotes there, program has that happen, they're decimated for at least 2 seasons, because that's a ton of catches and a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns. And Ohio State's like, yeah, we got him coming back. And Jigba, I mean, that's what brought me up about Purdue is they don't play Ohio State. So until the championship game of the Big Ten, if they were to get, I'm not at all saying that that's happening. I'm just saying that's the only time Purdue will play Ohio State.
Well, but let's have this conversation later in the summer too, and maybe hint at it now. The West Division,
kind of wide open.
I mean, there's nobody I'm in love with looking over there.
So you wouldn't be shocked. at pretty much anybody other than maybe Northwestern or.
Well, Northwestern's done it twice in 3
that's
years.
true.
So
That's true.
and Northwestern has this trend lately where they're abysmal one year and then in the championship game the next year, abysmal championship. They just were abysmal.
I was going to say they were pretty bad last year.
So back to a championship game. I mean, we'll see what Northwestern does if they keep the trend going.
Jumping back to the position players, the receivers, I have made this statement. I will continue to make this statement, and I doubt anybody will call me out on it because I've said within 3 to 5 years, David Bell is going to be a stud in the NFL.
Yep.
Because he runs great routes. He's got good hands. He's slowish, but if 2 out of 3 ain't bad, to quote Meatloaf, if you've got the other 2 and you have average speed, I think you still do great things. And I just see David Bell being a fantastic add to any core. He's not going to be a number 1, I don't think, but he's going to be the one that takes away from the coverage from number 1, and he's still going to get his. That's my prediction about David Bell within 3 to 5 years.
And what he was doing last year without too much more help there in that receiving group. I mean, they did some different things in West Lafayette with like Jackson Anthrop and some different players that you could kind of gadget around in ways, but when David Bell was hurt and out, you saw how the offense just was kind of stuck in the dirt at times, just because
there was a 2 to 3 weeks stint, and I think it started with Minnesota, maybe, or Minnesota was included. Purdue couldn't put any points on the board, and that was why your receiver was out a couple of weeks, and it was just it was so frustrating. And yeah, I agree. They, with him in it, you could pretty much score at will. I mean, and that's, I'm referencing the Tennessee game. Yeah. Where they were just, and it wasn't necessarily David Bell being the one catching it all, but he was available. He was there. And that pulled the defense away from the other receivers and stuff. So yeah, I think he's going to be a big spot to fill for Purdue.
And you look at Purdue's recent history with wide receivers. Rondale Moore went in the draft last year, had a great rookie season in Arizona. So, there is a path already built that David Bell can just kind of coast down into the NFL.
Yeah, and so I don't know how much of a big prediction that is, but, with the receiver core outside of the Big Ten that's in this draft, you throw David Bell in there, he's not going to stand out as the best overall talent. He's not going to stand out as the best technique wise, but where he does rank in each of those, I think it just opens the door for him to be a really good, an excellent number 2 in the NFL.
Let's have this conversation too, because we brought up Purdue and we brought up the West Division real quick here. In the West, you have Illinois, you have Iowa, you have Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern,
Wisconsin,
Purdue, and Wisconsin. Is there anybody that really should be the favorite? Is it just Wisconsin just because Wisconsin's name?
Yeah. At this point, yeah, I think because you know just as much as I do, when you get into a season, there's always going to be one team or maybe even 2 teams, and in this case, per division maybe, that just exceed what they were expected to do. So, a few years back when Minnesota was got up to what, number 9 or number, that was unexpected that year.
Correct.
So, I mean, you're going to have, I'm not saying, Northwestern, Purdue, or any of these teams are going to necessarily rank up that high, but they're going to exceed what they're expected to do. So I would say at this point, yes, I think Wisconsin, just because of their history of getting to that point, I mean, Iowa could be, but I don't know enough about their roster coming back that makes me want to say, yeah, they're going to contend. I mean, they got to number 2 last year and lost, to inexplicably, horribly to Purdue at home. They were a flawed team to get up to number 2. I don't know if they're any better. I don't know if they're worse. I just don't know. So I would say Wisconsin just by default right now anyways. in the West.
Okay. Good enough. And I don't really have much of a counter. I mean, a lot of this too still has to be kind of ironed out over the next few weeks. And that's why we're going to be talking about this throughout the summer as we get closer and understand. Did you know for the transfer portal for basketball, I took a look at this this morning. There are now more than 1,300 players in the transfer portal for college basketball. Like, that goes to show, like, these rosters are kind of ever changing. So when we have these conversations, we don't have a great idea yet.
Right. Well, and the transfer portal, and it's not the exact same, but it's very similar to in football than it is to basketball. And are they able to still add to their roster even like now? If they so choose?
So. Yeah.
It is the Wild West, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, somebody gets hurt and maybe they take a flyer on somebody in the portal, and then all of a sudden that person lights a fire under the rest of the team. You just don't know.
Which a
so far out still.
A conversation I'd love to have at some point is with the transfer portal and how that changes everything. Because you remember the conversation and the argument for it was, oh, well, this would help the athletes. This would be good for the athletes. So let's, like, for the players, let's do this. There are some counters to that. Of course, one is the very old-fashioned style argument that says, you know, you're not sticking things out. It's not really teaching you to push through adversity, so on and so forth. That's kind of based on principle. But then there's also the counter that says, look at high school athletes now.
They're starting to skip their senior years.
Well, and so many colleges are holding on to their scholarships because why wouldn't you just get somebody who's already physically mature that's played a couple of years of ball? Because chances are, whatever high school kid you get, you're going to have to re-recruit them anyway in the transfer portal the next off season. So why not just get the people who are ready right now physically? And high school kids are being hurt in this process with the transfer portal.
Well, with so many in the transfer portal, then you're right. You've got a catalog of, okay, let's see, what can we pick from here? And you've got this senior that's knocking it out of the park.
Coaches don't have to put an investment into you anymore.
Yeah.
They go get what's ready now.
Yeah. And well, I also saw that there are now seniors that are skipping their senior year in whatever sport to go get ready for college. Come on. That's killing it too, because that's name, image, and likeness there, because they're saying, hey, you know, if you skip your senior year, we can get you this or whatever to kind of compensate for that. I don't know, that we're getting into a really deep problem with as wild as a West as this is. It's starting to bleed into other areas that is not cool at all.
And we still have no answers. So that's something to pay attention to.
The ineptitude of the NCAA.
Correct. And I would love, though, at some point to get into the discussion about how it's hurting high school kids and maybe hear from people who are closer to these recruiting situations than even what we are. So we might work on that this summer.
That's a great idea, mister.
Look at that. We're having our own producing meeting.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. People are watching.
All right. We're going to hit the halftime break.
You are listening to Big 10 Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
I'm Richie, a.k.a. Midnight Agent Raw.
I'm Devin, a.k.a. Special Delivery Dev.
We're the Super Media Bros podcast. And each week, we give a comedically informative take on movies,
music,
television,
pro wrestling,
and much more. Check us out at supermediabrospodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you can listen to podcasts. Shades on.
We're off.
Hi, I'm Sam.
I'm Richie.
I'm Little Matt.
And here in the 500 Section Lounge, we are three dads who host a family-friendly weekly podcast.
Yep, we laugh, we go on tangents, and we talk to great guests.
Tangents? I don't know what you're talking about with that. You know, there are gases leaking.
All right, okay.
Yeah, we have legendary conversations from sports to history and everything in between.
So be on the lookout for what we do next.
And always be there to
grab a listen. Tweet.
What was that sound?
I was doing something else and I couldn't get to the tweet, so the whistle blow. So sure. Is that better?
It's so funny too. My mind has completely changed. I hear tweet. I don't think of a sound effect anymore. I was like, what was that? That was great. Okay, we're starting off the second half. The second half on the right note. Look, I can't even talk. So we're really flying here. Got a couple of different topics I want to throw at you here in this second half in the third quarter. One, speaking of player movement in college basketball, big news in Indiana yesterday. Race Thompson is coming back for yet another
He did decide
year.
to come back, though.
Yeah, so it's big news. And we've seen that now across the country. Armando Bacot at North Carolina is heading back to stay at Tar Heel.
Which is really surprising to me.
Well, and you know, part of it, and I don't necessarily want to throw 100% weight into this being the reason why, but this is where NIL helps to change some things in part because Armando Bacot's looking at being a maybe mid to late second round draft pick if he goes in the NBA this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily guaranteed for a huge career or guaranteed for a big contract. You could stay, build on your legacy. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, you stick around, you have another great year, your senior season. It's probably the most anticipated in Chapel Hill since Tyler Hansbrough coming back for a senior year?
It has to be because, like, I thought he put enough in his stock during that tournament to show that he would be, you know, a good draft pick. And the fact that he's still that low just is surprising to me. So, yeah, I could see him get that comparison because it took Hansbrough coming back to be able to get up as high as he did. I think he was in the lottery. I think he was a lottery pick, wasn't he? Like top 14 picks.
I'm actually not so sure, but
it's not important, but
yeah. But well, and my point wasn't necessarily comparing them on the court, just in terms of fan anticipation. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
To me, there's something to be said for legacy. And these young players have these opportunities. Bacot's in a position right now. He can build onto his legacy. He walks back to Chapel Hill any point in his life, and the guy will be adored and loved. And that's something you pass on when you enter early. I mean, that's just a thing that's part of the give and take naturally of this.
Right. And you know, and I think that's where, like you mentioned, NIL does come into play for the good.
Because it helps.
Excuse me. Yeah, because it helps bring those kids, it gives them the ability to make money and not have to claim hardship to go make millions or hundreds of thousands, whatever they come out to get in the NBA, because you miss out on a ton of things that you grow, you know, like memories. I have memories from college when I was in the dorms that I still remember vividly to this day. And if it was because I got to spend so much time in college. Now I won't get into how long because normally a 4-year degree doesn't take as long as I took, but
what's the Tommy Boy reference?
Yeah. Ooh, a shade under a decade. I actually put that on my graduation announcement because I did take a break in there, like a couple year break in between, but like all told years in from out of high school till I graduated was like 9 years, I think. And I think I put, just under a decade in my graduation announcement too. So, but yeah, I mean, those memories and if Bacot can make enough money, and it is so weird saying if he can make enough money to stay in school, absolutely he should, because these will be memories that you'll never get if you jet.
And think too, like in East Lansing, Cassius Winston leaves after a 4-year career. Cassius Winston will never have to buy another drink in East Lansing for the rest of his life.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like his legacy, he can walk back. Mateen Cleaves walks back now to East Lansing all the time, comes to games, still adored. Fans are just gush whenever he grabs the microphone. Like, there's something to be said for legacies and whatnot. But anyways, going back to where we started with the Big Ten, Race Thompson comes back. He averaged 11 points, about 8 rebounds a game this year. That's a big boost in Bloomington. I have to wait and see kind of what else happens. I know Trace Jackson Davis declared for the NBA draft. So, and a lot of people do and maintain their eligibility and come back. I think Trace is gone. I think if I remember reading that note correctly.
Do they have to make special note that they're keeping their eligibility?
Yes,
I know they used to anyways, and with the fact now that they can basically interact with agents now, even when they're not declared, I didn't know if there was a reason for them to actually say, but I'm maintaining my eligibility.
Yeah, and so most put that out there. Like Keegan Murray's brother, Chris Murray, entered in, but is maintaining his collegiate eligibility. So, and it makes
I don't understand what the point of declaring or saying you're keeping your eligibility just because of the whole NIL thing, anyways.
Well, and I suppose the point bigger on the player perspective is it about going and getting the feedback, because you declare for the NBA draft. You get to talk to scouts, you're talking to coaches, you talk to everybody, and a lot of them are telling you, hey, look, we like this about your game. This part is kind of holding you back. Like, this is what we want to see. And then you go back and you have now counsel heading into your next year of play. You know what you need to do if you want to get to that step.
And honestly, that is a great move allowed to happen, because you can talk to these scouts, and I know they're Eric Hunter Jr. from Purdue's doing the same thing.
Yep.
He's going to find out where he needs to improve, and then if he does or doesn't come back to Purdue, because he didn't enter the portal, so if he comes back right now, at least he's at Purdue, but he has things to. I can give him one. Hold on to the ball. How about that? Don't make dumb passes. How about that?
Not a salty Purdue fan at all.
I like Eric Hunter Jr. though. I do like him. They just, anyway.
It's a good qualifier to throw at the end of that.
True. I do like him.
But I do think it's going to be big to continue to pay attention, and we'll keep up to date as we move along here in the summer with some of the players that are returning around the Big Ten, especially with the NBA draft coming up in about 2 months. But something I wanted to talk with Sam about here, and this was not on the prep sheet, the rundown. So throwing him for a bit of a curve.
I don't have the little banner for it then. Great.
It's true. So you'll just keep our Twitter handles where you can follow us if you're looking at us on
follow us. Yes.
But Sam, I don't believe we've really had this conversation, but you're a baseball fan, into the spring sports. Do you follow Big Ten baseball, softball?
I do a little.
Okay.
It's not a ton. Honestly, here in the past couple of weeks, I fell really short on doing it, because at one point I know Purdue was like undefeated, and now I don't think that I saw they got swept by Illinois, so I know they're not undefeated still.
Yep, it's true.
So I do a little, but not a ton yet.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up here, and we'll talk a little bit maybe baseball, softball as we go on here. We're a month away from the Big Ten softball tournament. I'm not exactly sure the date on baseball tournament. I think it's around the same time. But when we get to those, we'll talk about those a little bit here on the show. But one thing I wanted to bring up here is I go to a lot and work in different aspects: softball, baseball, Big Ten games. And something that really bothers me this time of the year, look, we live in the Midwest. We know what it is. A ton of rain. Some days it's sleet. Some days it's 20 degrees. You never really know.
It's snow.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite frank, sometimes what it is. The fact that we have not found a way to push the schedules later in the year, even though that doesn't sync up with the rest of the scholastic model and schedule. We're playing games in February. We're trying to play games in the Midwest in February. Actually, all of those go down to the Carolinas and Florida
for spring breaks and stuff like that. Yeah.
And then they try and come back in March and play these games. To me, I like I said, I've seen a lot of these baseball and softball games. The crowd size, to me, is dependent on one thing: the weather.
Is it sunny and is it warm?
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, like, I've seen some games where on the weekend, a nice day, stands were completely full, because you had community come out, you had some little league teams come out and watch and support, and it's a nice day to spend at the ballpark.
Right.
But when it's bad weather, there's no interest in going to the game and sitting out there. So to me, you're really killing the product. And I don't believe this is the Big Ten's fault. I think this is a part of the NCAA and a part of a not so willing to cooperate by other conferences that maybe live in warmer areas.
Well, here's a question, and this might lend to solving this. Is it possible to have the Midwest teams come into some sort of an agreement with schools that are in the more warm areas to where, like, let's say for lack of a better, Michigan State, it's flipping freezing in March in East Lansing. You know, they come to an agreement with like Middle Tennessee State or something to where they could play their March home games in Tennessee to where it's more palatable to playing March baseball.
And you're not, I see what you're saying. There's a couple things. It would probably kill a budget because you'd have to have housing and living arrangements there for weeks on end.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't be able to attend classes doing that.
Sure, you could. If there's one thing we've learned during COVID is you can do classes remotely. It's maybe not the most perfect, but it is possible to do classes where they're doing remote, and it could be the same professor even.
But
it is
also
a possibility.
The other point to it is we don't ask any other sport to give up their home.
You're right.
games.
You're absolutely right. I'm just trying to think of something, because you're right. You're not going to get conferences letting them move the start of the season back 3 weeks. All of a sudden, there's less off days. There's doubleheaders, scheduled doubleheaders, not just rescheduled doubleheaders, and that can decimate a program's pitching staff if you put too much into one point. You know, I mean, granted, the major leagues do it, but you also know that a pitcher from college is at least 1 to 2 years, if not longer, out from the MLB to where they're readying their arms more for that long haul. They play close to 60 games, don't they, for a season in baseball, college baseball? You take 3 weeks out of that and shove everything still into there. It's not going to work. Well, so that was what I was thinking with maybe, you know, having colleges have a reciprocal agreement of some sort, you know, to be able to do that. I don't know.
Well, and I see what you're saying, but like, why don't we just play the championship instead of June, August? I mean, we're playing the World Series in November. But you know, baseball's as goofy as anything with the draft.
Well, yeah, you've got kids that are playing in the College World Series, and he was the 3rd round pick of the Atlanta Braves.
Right? Yeah,
they're playing baseball. All right.
Yeah. So I like, to me, that would help grow the games of college baseball and softball, because you see some of the crowds down in the South in the SEC. I mean, they love their college baseball and college softball. Here in the North, on a nice sunny day, you get a pretty nice attendance. You get a nice turnout. But it's like regionally, the sport is being choked in stranglehold by the weather. But like, that's something that if you wanted to grow the brand and grow the game, you would want to adjust, I would imagine, unless you just love the idea that you're in a warm area and players want to come play for you in the warm area because they can play at home. They don't have to travel for the first 5 weeks of the season and try and play in these other ballparks and to fit these games in. Like, playing in warmer states is clearly an advantage and more attractive for players.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. It's hard. That's why I'm sure that's why you don't see a Midwest team from the Big Ten, let's say, as a national. Shoot, when was the last? I mean, IU was in there when Kyle Schwarber played for him, but before that, you don't see a Big Ten team actively in the World Series pool.
Not often,
Hardly.
but Michigan was a couple years ago.
Michigan too. Yep. So, I mean, but yet it makes news. Like, people talk about it, especially in the college baseball world. They're like, "Oh, we've got the representative from the Big Ten." You know, that's a big deal because while you do get players that come out and become good pros in your programs, they're not as prevalent than they are from LSU, Tennessee, those warm weather places,
But I did want to bring that conversation to the table because
Yeah.
I think the Big Ten baseball, softball it's doing great. I'm not trying to say it's not a great product. My point just is if you
Right.
got the hands off of its neck and let it breathe, that maybe this product could grow even further. And
Yeah, I don't disagree at all.
You're being choked by the weather. You can't change that, but maybe you can change the schedule and change when you're playing these games on the calendar. That's what I wanted to throw out.
Yeah, and but I just, like you mentioned, though, you don't see other conferences that don't have this issue being open to move the schedule. They're just not going to. They've already got it really nice. They're not, if it ain't broke, it don't fix it in their mind. It ain't broke to them.
You don't need to share the top of the ladder with. They're just fine by themselves.
You're okay getting every recruit basically that doesn't have a tie to the Midwest or anything, or even or whatever, we don't have to share. Why would we?
All right, let's
poll question. We got the poll question.
Oh, what do we have here?
Well, you suggested, and I went with. What was your favorite moment from this past NCAA or NCAA? Sorry, guys, got to keep the integrity. To the NCAA basketball season, we've got 4 choices, and as always, if you don't see your choice, comment below with your choice. We've got Rutgers beating then a buzzer beater against number 1 Purdue, Iowa's Big Ten tourney run, St. Peter's Elite 8 run, or UNC ending Coach K's run. Those are the 4 options. Or if you have a different one, put it in the comments.
This is interesting. So as somebody with an interest in MSU athletics, if I were to pick a Michigan State moment, it's also at Purdue's demise, Tyson Walker's 3-pointer to knock off the Boilermakers. But for
they weren't number 1, though.
They were not. You're right. But it was, a much needed win at that point in the year for Michigan State. That was really
solidified that they were going to be in the tournament. It was pretty positive they were going to be.
Yep.
But that sealed the deal.
Yep. You're spot on. That Rutgers shot and the celebration of storming the court, that see to me, here's where I get a little bit distinctive on this. Like St. Peter's Elite 8 run, I'm looking at and pointing here on my screen that you can't really see my finger wag behind it. But that to me symbolizes and represents what is amazing and so great about March Madness. The Rutgers buzzer beater over number 1 Purdue symbolizes and represents to me what is so great about college basketball. You had a home crowd. Everybody's in there wanting to knock off number 1 for the first time in school history. And the shot goes in from an improbable distance by Ron Harper Jr. And immediately you could see the cell phone videos that everybody had. They go running down the bleachers and they all party together. And you can see in that moment, it's like telepathic between everybody there on the floor. This is a moment that not a single person will ever forget that was involved with it. That's what's amazing about college basketball.
And where were they, Dalton? College.
Yeah. Going back to that point, yeah.
I've told you the story about when we stormed the field after we ended the nation's longest home losing streak at Ball State. We tore down the goalposts. I will remember that. Forever.
It's been, 50, 60 years, and you still remember.
Correct, right. Like it was yesterday.
But in the St. Peter story is awesome. It's great. That's what's great about March Madness. But there is a difference about what makes peak college basketball and what makes peak March Madness. And I think that's the difference between those.
Wow. You just annihilated every other possibility, I think.
Well,
but if you look at these options, there's only one that I'm not somewhat related to in this. At being a Purdue fan, though, Purdue got beat by Rutgers. They got beat by Iowa in that tourney run, and they got beat by St. Peter's to get to the Elite 8. I go with D.
Purdue was the necessary step for every other team's success this year. Like that's how it just unfolded.
Well, and you never know how they match up if Purdue and UNC go together in the Elite Eight. So Purdue was, I mean, not saying they would have won, but never know.
Through our 5 stages of grief, have you finished through yet?
Yeah,
we were working on that together earlier.
I've accepted it. I'm not bitter about it anymore. It just is. It just is.
Good enough. So everybody let us know on Twitter, and we'll get back to some of those next week. We'll read off some of our favorite moments. Let's go to the fourth quarter.
Yep.
All right, fourth quarter. This is the section of the show where we bring you our headlines, something that stuck out to us throughout the last week. And as Sam goes jumbo on your screen, if you're listening on the audio platform, just imagine me minimized off the side, and Sam
just
is
a little guy. Put you in my pocket.
Sam is large and in charge there in front of the screen. Sam Sentinel, what do we got?
Well, today is it's titled Irrelevant.
Okay.
Question mark. Okay. So we're coming up on the NFL draft here within the next couple of weeks, and it's evolved from a 2-day thing, a Saturday, Sunday, where just wall-to-wall NFL draft, to a Thursday, or is it a Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Is that what it is? It's not Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
I think it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Okay. So yeah, that's what it is. Whatever. Do you need 4 days? Yeah. But anyways, when it comes to the draft, there is a specialty pick at the end of the draft. It's the Mr. Irrelevant draft pick, which is the last person taken in the draft. He's called Mr. Irrelevant. And I looked at some crazy drawn out 7-round mock drafts, which, by the time you get to 5, 6, and 7, I don't know how you could even fathom that you're going to come close to it. But ProfessionalFootballNetwork.com projects San Francisco with the 262nd pick to take Ronald Williams II, a tight end from UT Martin. Okay. He's a graduate student. He is 6'4", 235, from Memphis, Tennessee. His career at Tennessee Martin, at Tennessee Martin, is that right? Yeah.
I'll look.
It's Tennessee Martin.
Yep, you're right.
99 receptions. Couldn't you have done one more thing to get him that 100? Come on, guys. But 99 receptions, 1,217 yards, 7 TDs. So not anything to shake a stick at. Not great. He's not. I mean, but you wouldn't shake a stick at it, and I don't know why you'd shake a stick at anything. But that's the saying. At least in the Midwest, it is. But let's talk about what Mr. Irrelevant gets. My good Lord, I can remember some things to where, they got a jersey or whatever that had the specialty number on it. Mm-hmm. And there's actually an organization now called Mr. Irrelevant Incorporated or something. And they throw a week-long celebration to the person that gets the last, or that is picked last. Wow. They get a vacation. They get, let's see here. Great podcasting, Sam. Jeez Louise. They get one guy got a puppy. I mean, they now are making it a big deal, and it was started by a guy that was the last pick in the draft at one point, and he started this organization who he's now, if he hasn't passed, this was a couple years ago, that he's 95 or 6, but I'm trying to find his name. Jeez. Paul Salatas.
Okay.
He was the last pick in the draft. He played at USC. But the point is that they call him Mr. Irrelevant because they want everybody, and they throw this big thing for them because they want everybody to know that every pick matters. This guy, if he does indeed, Frank Williams II, or Rodney Williams, Frank Williams, I don't know where I got Frank, Rodney Williams II, if he gets picked, he's not only got all these accolades thrown upon him because of where he was drafted, but he also is a graduate student. He's got a degree. He's got 2 degrees from a university. So he's going to be successful no matter what he does. And I don't think it's irrelevant, when you put a spotlight on somebody for being the last pick in the draft. So I am always, if there's one draft pick I make sure to look at, it's that one. I don't know why. It's all over the place. So and so was picked Mr. Irrelevant. There have actually been a few pretty decent Mr. Irrelevants, and there's even a 30 for 30 short on John Tuggle, who was the last pick by the Giants in Bill Parcells' tenure as the Giants coach. And great story, but he made the team. He was successful after one season, and then got cancer and ended up passing away. But the impact was the thing. He had a big impact on the Giants, and Bill Parcells still talks about him in a great way. So, Mr. Irrelevant, I don't think it's irrelevant. That's the same as that.
I like it. I like it very much. I didn't realize the week-long vacation or the puppy. That's
what a deal, right?
No kidding. Did you see?
Essentially, this whole thing too. It says he can request anything. So if he wants to learn to surf, they'll have surfing there for him, lessons for him. If he wants to, basically, if he's a single dude, they'll have a bunch of single, people there for that person to meet if they want.
What?
Like, they set it up to where it's celebrating that person.
That's wild,
isn't it?
Wow. Speaking of puppies too. And we were talking about Duke last segment. Did you see what happened to Coach K?
No, what happened?
They were recognizing the team, and John Shire was talking at the podium and was saying, we thought what would be really cool for you, and now that you got all this time on your hands, you need somebody else to train.
They got him a puppy, didn't they?
And they gave him a puppy. It looks like a chocolate lab. There's a video of it on Twitter. Go find that.
I'm gonna have to find that.
Yeah, and it's just this adorable little puppy, and Coach K's holding it and makes him wave his paw, and it's just the cutest thing ever. But apparently, some Duke fans brought some light to it, because I was sitting there at first, I'm like, oh, how adorable, and then I thought, oh, what if he didn't want a puppy? Like,
what if he's allergic to dogs?
And so I was like, oh boy, that's a tough gift to give.
It's either a home run or a strikeout. There's no in between there.
Correct. And it turns out he's had dogs, and he had a dog named Blue that passed away about a year ago. And he had said in retirement he wanted another one. So some Duke fans on social media kind of brought that up, and were like, okay,
now it makes sense.
That is cool. Like, that was neat. So that since we're talking about puppies, I figured I'd throw that in there, because that was a cool moment that happened.
Right.
All right, we'll go with the Dalton Daily. I wanted to talk about umpires, and I'm not going to be the one who starts to rail against the boys in blue, or the men in stripes, or the women in stripes, or any of the officials. I want to highlight, because there's a couple of different events that have happened in the past week or so that really need to be brought to attention. In Mississippi, there's a female umpire who's making her way after a game back to her vehicle, and she was assaulted in a parking lot. She was punched in the eye. She shows a picture of her face and the after effects, and she had to go get care taken of for that. There was an umpire, a viral video on Twitter down in Texas. He disagrees. A coach comes out, disagrees with the call from the umpire. Must have said something to the umpire, and the umpire threw him out. And the coach then pushed him over by his neck and threw him onto the ground right in front of a Little League baseball game, assaulting the umpire. So you have two instances that go rather viral in this past week. And mind you, I'm not out looking for any of this. Those two instances come across my timeline because they're such big deals. Right. And then you have, at least in Indiana, again, not looking for any of this. I found 2 or 3 games that were canceled this past week because, and it was high school games, JV games, because they can't find umpires. Mm-hmm. They cannot find umpires to work the games. So games are actively being canceled. And folks, what I want to bring to the table here is we have such, and we've done this for years. We have such a toxic culture and behavior and flat out disrespect towards officials. Can some officials really just blow it? Yes, they can. Can you disagree with them? Yes, you can absolutely disagree with them. But the disrespect and assault, we're not even talking borderline. We're not talking about an opinion or
Full-fledged.
interpretation. It's a full-fledged assault. It has got to stop, not only because it's disgusting to watch a human do that to another human for especially something as small as a game, but we're talking about now, Sam, you have kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably going to be a day soon where you go to a ball game and have to get back in the car and head right back home because nobody's working. Because why would somebody want to be an umpire right now? It doesn't pay a lot. You're disrespected. You're put on full blast. You're risking assault, apparently, whether you're on the field or trying to get back to your car after a game because somebody disagrees with you, whether you were right or wrong in making the calls that you tried to make. Folks, we have got to cut the head off the snake in terms of toxic behavior because you're starting to choke the life out of prep sports and kids that of course we know how impactful sports are. Athletics is in terms of the life lessons it teaches you in teamwork, resilience, getting through adversity, all those different things. Kids are not going to have those lessons given anymore. They're not going to have the experiences of playing at ball diamonds. And I don't mean to make it sound like apocalyptic and doomsday, but if we continue to make it set like this for these umpires, we're going to have less and less umpires around, which means less and less games to be played. We're going to be killing experiences for the youth in our country. So folks, please do better. And if you see something like this, help speak up because it's a crime, but it's also a crime for the future of prep sports in America.
Yeah. And if you think, this is not cliche at all, sometimes those sports are the only safety some kids have.
Yep.
And if there's no officiating available, they've got to cancel. Then those kids have 2 hours of doing whatever.
Yep.
Or they might have a coach that's very influential.
Yep.
They get to spend 2 hours with somebody that is a big influence in their life. Now that's been taken.
Like if you
not to mention, it allows them that game time to fine tune their talents.
Yep. There are so many and you have so many great memories and fun experiences from playing. Like if you've been in athletics, you have so many lessons and so many intangible lessons that it's hard to really describe to somebody who never was a part of athletics, like exactly what it is you gain as a person from playing in sports. But all of that helps mold you as a young person, help mold me as a young person. That type of stuff is going to start dwindling if we don't take care of the human beings that really take care of the games themselves.
For sure. And something that, I as a parent, luckily have been able to coach for as long as I have. And I understand the value of my kids being on a team. Now I coach 2 of them, but the other 2, I don't. I still know what that coach is going through. Well, here's what parents need to understand. You're not winning a national championship, a state title, a sectional title, whatever title you think you're going to get to at some point, you're not winning it at the youth sport level.
Right.
There are 2 things that you're accomplishing. You're getting them the love of the sport and you're getting them some social interaction and having fun.
Yep.
Don't those officials are getting paid maybe $15 a game for 2 hours worth of their time. Even if they're getting paid 30, that's still under what a lot of people are demanding minimum wage to be. Okay. And they're not professional. They haven't gone and gotten certified at many of these levels. A lot of places cannot afford to buy certified official or pay for certified officials. Correct. They're too expensive. So you offer $25 to a dad that doesn't have a kid in that game or whatever, or to a high schooler. They should know the rules, the basic rules. Absolutely. But they've got to just like your players, they practice and then they fine tune and show off what they know to this point in games. Umpires don't have, or referees don't have that.
Yep.
They've got to fine tune and show what they know in the heat of interaction.
Competition. Yeah.
Competition. No, so they don't have that opportunity. So they're going to make mistakes. You can be not happy about a mistake. Dalton, When I was coaching junior high football, I one time told a referee that him and his crew completely blew a call and they need to pull their heads out of where the sun doesn't shine. But I said it in a nice enough way. He clapped his hands and said, "We will, coach. We'll get it right next time." You can respect an official and still disagree with them.
Correct. Absolutely. And I hope everybody listening doesn't interpret it as you can't say anything. You can't have like real dialogue, real conversation exists, but you cannot be assaulting human beings.
No, that is so disappointing because the kids are going to learn that from the parent.
Yes.
And my dad or mom doesn't respect that official. Why should I? I've seen a video of where a little league baseball team didn't like the umpire's ways of calling, and I don't know if it was from the coach's like the coach telling them, but the pitcher wound up and threw a fastball. The catcher moved out of the way, hit the umpire squarely in the gut. And I'm like, those kids, that if it came from the coach should be gone forever. Yeah.
Folks, if we keep crapping where we eat, like we're gonna be having to pay the piper real soon when it comes to prep sports. I mean, just point period.
You're absolutely correct.
I remember playing in basketball was really my sport in the game that I loved, but I would talk with my mom about, officials and, this one really messed up the call during the game. And she said, you know what? It doesn't matter. You don't get to say a thing. She said, if I ever catch you saying something to the official, she goes, I will come down and pull you off by the ear. Like it was pretty structured in like, okay, I stay away. And I remember.
Well, keep going.
Oh, I remember an official in my perception, messing up a call on me during a game. And I was so frustrated with it because it was so not. It was so grossly not. And I remember walking away and nobody could see me. No official could see me. And I rolled my eyes because I was like, okay, like I'm frustrated. I'm mad, but I need to recollect. And my mom saw me roll the eyes and she wagged a finger at me from the stands. And I'm like, he didn't even see. Like, I'm just mad. But no, and my point overarching being, we have got to start respecting officials, or else, I mean, we're going to see consequences for it, not just from these physical instances, but we have got to encourage and give somebody a reason to officiate games, especially when they're doing it right now, not for the money, but just to really help out, give back to games. I mean, that's the motivation many have. But anyway,
and I to piggyback off of that, I've told my boys, if I'm not coaching, why are you mad at that call? Well, because the umpire got it wrong. I said, what was the call? And they'd tell me, you know why it was the right call? And they're like, no, because the umpire said so. It doesn't matter if you agree with it or not. The umpire made that call. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
But I can guarantee you that most umpires will hold it against you if you outwardly show that they're wrong or you think they're wrong. Okay, since you're pitching, you have a coffee can for a strike zone now.
It's true. It's true.
Think about what you're doing when you react.
All right, as we get ready to wrap up and say goodbye, Sam, where can the fine folks find us?
Well, if you're watching, you can see up at the top we have Twitter, Facebook, and a website. The website is oddpodsmedia.com. We're part of the Odd Pods Media Network, and there's a stable of shows. Our family is big there. You can find us there. You can go to Big 10 Plus 4 on Facebook or on Twitter at Big 10, spell out plus, then the number 4. Then you can find us individually on Twitter. Just look at our handle there at the bottom of the screen, or it's at Sam Sprunger1 or at Dalton Shetler. And you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we do stream on ASAP Network. Thank you, ASAP.
All right. It's a loaded platform. A lot of different ways you can get to us. But that will do it for this week from us here at Big 10 Plus 4. That's Sam Sprunger. I'm Dalton Shetler, and thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you next week.
See you later.